Hello and welcome to Truth, Lies and Work, the award-winning psychology podcast brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. My name is Leanne. I'm a chartered psychologist.
My name is Al. I'm a business owner.
And we are here to help you simplify the science of work and create amazing workplace cultures.
Yeah, this is something we've never actually done before. This is a YouTube-only bonus episode featuring the incredible Rory Sutherland. I'd normally introduce the guest here, but if you haven't listened to part one, then go there first, because the link is in the description below. And if I can work out how to make it pop up here, I will do that too.
And if you've come here to listen to part two from our audio-only podcast, say hi in the comments. We would love to say hi back. Right, time for me to stop talking. Here is part two of the incredible Rory Sutherland.
I've got a theory, and I was pleased to see in her very excellent book, Helen Edwards wrote a book called, which is called From Marginal to Mainstream, which is effectively about trend spotting, but also the fact that most really important trends effectively come from what the Americans would call left field. In other words, Zoom and the pandemic. These things aren't really the things you've been thinking about for the previous 20 years. They come from left field. And one of my predictions, which I've always made, which she kind of effectively gives quite a bit of weight to, is if property prices continue to rise and electric car technology continues to improve and Elon Musk's Starlink thing actually works well, a proportion, certainly of the younger population, with the invention of what I call the electric Winnebago, the electric motorhome, might actually go permanently nomadic. Because if you think about it, okay, if you've got a big American motor, let's say you buy, 50 acres of Kent woodland, and you put a big shed in it to store your shit. Okay, so you can always park there, but you've got, let's say, 200 kilowatt hours of juice in a battery. Okay, in your motorhome, you can effectively go off and you've got Elon's Starlink thing. You can effectively go off the grid permanently. I jokingly said the one thing they haven't quite cracked is the toilet. Okay, what someone needs to invent is like a microwave toilet that desiccates your stool so that you can dispose of it easily. Okay, but actually, okay, the cost, the woodland you could buy for £30,000. The motorhome, let's say it's £100,000. That's quite a lot better than an apartment, and you can drive around in it. And so I genuinely wonder, you probably own a car as well. You wouldn't make every trip to the shops in your motorhome. But it strikes me as, when I read that in Helen Edwards' book, I thought, well, you've validated me, because I've always suspected that the economics of property ownership eventually becomes so unfavourable that effectively, going nomadic and going, traveller, new age traveller, makes more and more sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that you could say, all right, you buy your how many acres for 30,000 in Kent, but then you could also do it in northern France. Which you probably pay half. You could do it in Poland. Would you pay a quarter?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. No. And in fact, as you got richer, you just buy more woods around Europe. Because, that's the really interesting thing.
So, Rory, I must have watched hours and hours of your stuff on YouTube. I have read twice your book, which I absolutely love, which is how we started, because I think I sent you an email like, what is it with you and bees or something was was the subject line to try and get your attention. Really what I'd love to do is that our audience is business leaders and people who want to build amazing teams. So it skews towards the workplace. So really what I think is there's only really one or two questions I've got for you. And so really what I want to get from you is, what is it that you know about the workplace from your research, from Ogilvy, that you think other people should know? And you can riff on that for an hour or 10 minutes, whatever you like.
Okay, here's something, which is that most technologies don't really deliver, either for positives or for negatives, reliably on their promise in the early stages. Okay, we all know phrases like, we tend to overestimate the importance of technology in the short term, and we tend to underestimate its impact in the long term. And I think that's very true. So we were talking earlier about effectively my prediction of the electric Winnebago. In other words, luxury motorhomes that are electrically powered, not just obviously for movement, but for all your Nespresso machines, flat screen TVs and Elon's Starlink thing, which would enable people to escape the property market and effectively go nomadic. Okay. Now, for that to happen, it probably requires the concatenation of quite a lot of events for it to actually happen. And I jokingly said that it's the toilet, in particular feces, not urine, that is the last remaining problem. Okay. You can effectively go off the grid if you've got a 100 kilowatt battery underneath your vehicle. That will keep you going for quite a few days. Heating, you can obviously use heat pumps, air-to-air heat pumps. That's getting interesting because you don't actually need a house anymore once that technology comes real. But it will require quite a few other, obviously other technologies to come into play before it becomes practical. So one of the things that does interest me at the moment is effectively the extraordinary skepticism about the benefits of flexible, hybrid, and remote working. And indeed, I included that the 4-day week, by the way. Now, the reason I'm astonished by the skepticism, okay, and these strange articles in the Telegraph and the Times, which are always, everybody must get back into the office immediately, this is a disgrace, okay, is what I suspect is it's very largely evidence of what I call Puritanism bias. In other words, the idea of no pain, no gain. Now, the history of technology over the last 150 years has plenty of examples of gain without pain, okay? I mean, large elements of automation, the automobile, okay? If you ranted around going, my God, this is disgusting, people will be unable to ride horses. Our basic equestrian skills will get diluted by the arrival of the automobile. And look at these people not walking, but simply riding around, okay? That would have been ridiculous, okay? But what fascinates me about the workplace is that genuinely fascinates me is we've introduced technologies like email, which I think are probably productivity vampires. I think they're a catastrophe. I think the open plan office is a disaster, okay? We've got rid of things like general jollity, staff entertainment, sort of expense accounts. We've imposed more and more regulation from HR and finance to a point where most people in a job feel they're working for those ancillary functions, not for their boss. Okay, the person who fires you nowadays, it used to be your boss face to face, and now it's some weird HR finance, axis which just decides that you're surplus to requirements. Okay, hiring isn't really done by your boss anymore. It's done in this kind of weird remote process. Okay, we've done all these things and we haven't looked at the productivity effects or indeed the morale effects at all. Okay, and I think they're a bloody disaster. And then this thing comes along, which, unlike all the other things like email, for example, and the open plan office, staff actually really like. And the very fact that they like it and enjoy it means it has to be treated with huge suspicion. We never imposed the same kind of ludicrous, scrutiny on email. Now, I think, email is micro efficient and macro catastrophic, by which I mean that, yes, it is more efficient and quicker and cheaper to send an email to one person than it is to send a memo to one person, okay, than to dictate or type up a memo, print it out and deliver it, okay? On the other hand, at scale, the fact that everybody can email everybody for free 24 hours a day, okay, I think it's been a catastrophe because email effectively requires the recipient to prioritize the message. Because in any 1 hour, there's always a 1% chance that someone really important has sent you something really urgent, okay, you have to keep checking your email. And then if you read the wonderful book, Algorithms to Live By, thanks ever so much. If you read the wonderful book, Algorithms to Live By, what you see is there's a mental thing called switching costs. Every time you switch your attention, okay, you effectively, your brain has to kind of reboot. And so the more frequently you shift your attention, and email is basically one massive, great permanent distraction. Every time you shift your attention, your productivity basically plummets. A very good book, by the way, Algorithms to Live By. I really recommend it. And so we've introduced all these technologies. We've also made the office, I think, in many ways, email has made the office slightly joyless because it means everybody's busy all the time, which means there isn't the serendipity and banter and so forth that you used to have. And in fact, we've also created an office environment where nobody really has very much free time, which means that the conversations that used to be both the reward for and the kind of, I suppose, the stimulus for going into a social environment like an office have disappeared. Okay, I can remember the pre-email office, and it was a much more fun place. But no one's had the slightest discussion about this. But then a technology comes along which, after all, delivers the real promise of the internet, which is you can do things from anywhere, which means people are spared the time costs of commuting. They're spared the time costs of also, cleaning your teeth and getting fully dressed and all that and all that crap in the morning. They give people extraordinary flexibility to time shift. So maybe they take a bit of leisure in the middle of the day when it's sunny and work in the evenings. Extraordinary benefits to people who are carers, single parents, even dual parents, anybody who has caring responsibilities, massive thing. Huge time savings cost savings because you're not paying to commute so much. Enormous cost savings if you take the opportunity to go and live somewhere less expensive to work, okay? And all those things are fantastic. But because for the first time, it's the introduction of something into the office that staff actually enjoy and like, it's treated with 10 times the suspicion of any other technology. And I think that's genuinely whack. Now, here you have something which has the opportunity to solve quite a lot of important economic problems. I mean, the climate crisis, undoubtedly video conferencing is probably the best way to actually reduce the carbon footprint of transport is not actually by making journeys cleaner, it's by removing unnecessary journeys that could be made over video conference. If you remove those, that's a very rapid gain. Enormous gains in terms of things like levelling up, in terms of making London, for example, far less central in terms of consumer expenditure to the UK economy. Benefits in terms of train overcrowding, road congestion, benefits in terms of serendipity. One of the joke points I made is that when COVID happened, it was the first time in 20 years that I would regularly meet people from Birmingham. And it wasn't just, the strange Zoom conversations I had with people in Botswana and people in Peru, okay, which would never have happened if I'd needed to make those journeys, by airliner, okay? So there was a huge increase in serendipity made possible by this because you can talk to people casually without the sunk cost investment of time and transport costs, okay? So this is potentially the technology we should be talking about at least as much as we talk about AI. How do you benefit from it? But because of the fact that staff enjoy it, its adoption is automatically framed as slacking off. That was also true of working from home on a Friday before COVID, by the way. The very fact that people liked it meant it was treated with a very high degree of suspicion. That's crazy. If you trust your staff, they know what makes them most productive. And they can't help but notice that bloody hell every day. Now, I have in my defense, I'm not just a recent convert. I discovered Zoom in about 2018, early 2019, and realized that it was a step change in terms of the quality of video calling. That it effectively had crossed the crappiness threshold, which earlier technologies like Skype had failed to do. I also realized that the Zoom model, which is book a meeting, everybody joins, is the only model for this. The FaceTime stroke Skype model of it's like a phone call but with video doesn't work. It's too intrusive to ring someone unannounced It's like that thing. I grew up in Wales, and people would do this a bit. Turn up at your house without ringing you first. You know, genuinely, you don't do that. Okay, and turning up in someone's office on video without actually pre-arrangement is just a socially unacceptable thing to do. So Skype also and FaceTime, what they got wrong was they modeled it on a phone call, not on a meeting room. So that was a really important shift in making this actually work. But we should be spending genuinely, significant amounts of time questioning, okay, this is obviously a huge boon potentially of the economy because it moves expenditure away from totally unproductive sort of sump sectors like real estate and commuting, which are money people spend on things they don't choose to do, and moves it into the productive economy again. We should be spending a lot of time talking about how you reinvent your business around this technology. And yet, because it's tainted by the suspicion that people enjoy it, okay, none of this is happening. And I think there's something there which I'd regard as evidence of a kind of tragedy, which is, have we become so moronic, okay, that effectively we regard pain as a proxy measure for productivity? Because if that's the case, why do we even bother? And I find that question just really interesting.
So that is really interesting. So I know when we spoke before, you were quite critical of the property owners and thinking they're behind this push to come back, the return to the office. But you hadn't mentioned this idea of, that if people like it, it must be bad. So this kind of goes along with the idea that ideas that don't make sense, that have got an underlying meaning. What's your sort of favorite example? I've read a lot in the book, but favorite example of an idea that doesn't make sense but actually works really well, perhaps at Ogilvy?
Well, I suppose it's the question of psychologic. One of the things I think in terms of psychologic, and we just have to understand effectively the lens through which people by default see the world, because the default lens in any organization, I mean, okay, if you take this even further, the obsession with efficiency in organizations, particularly organizations which are kind of run by the finance function, has gone from being highly beneficial, okay, to actually being a major obstacle to growth and probably net negative. And what's happened with efficiency is, instead of having efficiency as a kind of strategic goal, okay, what's happened is we've effectively imposed efficiency measures into all parts of the organization. So, I am apparently efficient only to the extent that I perform billable work for my clients, okay? That's pretty much the finance functions. My percentage billability is basically a measure of my worth, okay? Now, whereas it's absolutely true that you have to make more money than you spend in a business, and I'm not disputing that for a second, let's look at, one of the, sharpest tools in the box in terms of overall productivity, a guy called W. Edwards Deming, who is really a kind of American guy of part Welsh ancestry, I might add, who more or less led, he absolutely venerated in Japan, because he kind of led to the whole sort of Japanese economic miracle and contributed considerably to extraordinary businesses like Toyota in terms of their output. And one of his sayings was, if you want to optimize the whole, you've got to sub-optimize the parts. And with our narrow kind of micro focus on efficiency, we've created organizations which have optimized the parts, which makes it actually highly inefficient when it comes to the whole. So let me give you an example of this, okay? Going back to my first point, email is micro efficient. Looked at from the point of view of a single piece of messaging, one-way messaging, it's about as efficient as you could get. Actually, slightly more efficient, to be honest, might be the ability to record yourself and email it. I don't know why Outlook and Gmail don't have a simple record a video reply function. I have no idea, okay, but they don't. But nonetheless, it is spectacularly efficient. It instantaneously goes from any place on the planet to anywhere else on the planet. It's addressable. It's reasonably confidential. It has everything you want. Okay. However, if you want to, let's take a completely banal business request, which is I need to fix a meeting with these two other people sometime in the next week, right? If you get on a phone call or a video call and you say, okay, when can we do it next? That's a 30-second conversation and it's over in 30 seconds, maybe a minute, okay? If you start doing that with email exchanges, like I can't do Thursday, what about Wednesday, okay? Literally, it will take you 5 to 10 days to actually arrange a meeting with 4 or 5 people. Okay, because of all the toing and froing and the asynchronicity of it. And that's a perfect example of where something is micro. Now, one of the reasons we should absolutely cherish Zoom and Teams. Teams has got a lot better, actually. I was really hostile, but Teams has at least got better. One of the reasons we should cherish these things is it's hopefully rebalancing the textual and the asynchronous and returning it to what in evolutionary terms is the absolutely natural mode of human interaction, which is people talking to each other kind of face to face. Okay. Now, just to give an example, if you ever met anybody who spoke at the same speed that they typed, okay, their company would be absolutely intolerable. I mean, unless they could, I'm not talking about typists like court stenographers or pitman shorthand, but most people type. When you actually translate typing into speech, it is glacially slow. So our conversation would be, hello, Al. It's really good, delete, good to see you, right? Now, this podcast at typing speed will be unlistenable. Okay, I mean, you want to punch me in the face, and yet, we don't actually judge how slow it is to type because we think, oh, I'm quite a fast typist. It's a bit like saying I'm quite a fast swimmer. Yeah, but compared to a runner, you're shit. Okay, I mean, human swimming. It's a competition in the Olympics, and I get it. Sometimes you fall into a river, but as a mode of human transportation, swimming is a total piece of shit, right? Absolutely, I could outrun the world champion 100-meter swimmer. I'm a fat 58-year-old man, right? And that's my point about email, that we think it's fast because we're quite fast compared to other people, but when viewed from the context of overall activity, it's an absolute piece of crap, right? I think I find this just really interesting because there's nobody really there. You've got all these sort of weird groups, okay, which are kind of optimize, like HR and finance and everyone, and they're all optimizing the parts. They're all optimizing the parts, but the whole is a bloody mess. I mean, one of the most painful experiences you'll ever have is something like buying a house or conveyancing, because everything happens asynchronously. I have sent this to the surveyor. The survey has written. No, you can't have feeling. If we could just get all those people in a room all together, we could actually solve this in a third of the time. But nobody's really, and this is the worst thing, is judging how billable I am, right, isn't a measure of how productive I am at all. Because as I get older, I get faster at stuff. Okay? There are there are problems which some people can solve quite quickly and other people take ages to solve. And what we're almost doing by kind of, fetishizing things like the billable hour is we're effectively we're incentivizing. Well, this is my real worry, okay? Most businesses, particularly the advertising business, but a hell of a lot of businesses really, where they create value is not like manufacturing, where it's an even process. Hours input into manufacturing is proportionate to output, is proportionate to value. Okay, most organizations really, I mean, if you think about film companies, pharmaceutical companies, the things that really make the money, the things that are really valuable, are actually a tiny but sometimes unpredictable part of their overall output. Publishing is the same. A few blockbusters have to pay for all the also rans. And if you create an atmosphere of efficiency where everything everybody does all the time has to be valuable, what you're doing is you're optimizing for the average and you're incentivizing mediocrity. And that's where I bring this back to bees. Bees accept the fact that there's 80% of their work is, quite rightly, efficiency driven. It's exploit. It's how do we take the information we already have and make the most use of it. But 20% of B activity is exploratory, which is what don't we know? Where else might there be pollen? Is there a chance of us getting lucky? Okay. And what we're doing in organizations now, which not only makes them less productive, but also makes them much less interesting to work in, because individual people have their autonomy stripped away. Okay. Their ability to make sort of discretionary judgment is stripped away. We're creating these organizations which are purely optimized around exploit and have no space left for explore. I don't know if you saw that thing on Twitter, which is Google employees comparing what it was like to work in Google in like 2007 and what it's like now. But you see this absolutely everywhere. That, the shareholder value kind of movement is actually destroying shareholder value because it makes it more important for the organization to perform incremental improvements in notional efficiency. And it effectively, organizations, by trying to use efficiency and cost cutting as a means of value creation, are actually destroying themselves. In the medium to long term, the reason there are no bee hives or bee nests where everybody obeys the waggle dance is because there were, and they all went extinct. The only bees that survived were the ones that realized there was a trade-off between explore and exploit.
I think you said something about the average size pilot in your book, didn't you? So are we talking about a similar idea with the average employee, and optimizing for that just isn't going to work?
No, so optimizing for the average, and bear in mind that most financial information, most data is collected for aggregation. And so the people at the top don't actually know what's going on. They just know the average of what's going on. And so they look at something like, they look at the spreadsheet, which shows what do we make money from in an advertising agency. And they go, okay, on average, the most profitable thing is this. But if you looked at where the value was created, okay, it will be somewhere completely different. It will be, freakishly good ideas created once every 7 weeks by someone you can't necessarily predict in advance. Okay. And so when you get an appalling misalignment, this is where I bring it back to the Puritanism bias. Effort reward. The effort reward heuristic is really what's at work here. Okay. There's a very strong effort reward heuristic, which is this is effortful, therefore it must be rewarding. Okay. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's absolutely right. I'm not saying, hey, gain but no pain. Okay. But I'm saying that a less painful way of doing something is more likely to be a more efficient way of doing something than it is likely to be, deserving of suspicion. And so we get to this. We have these metrics, which how many billable hours are you working? Okay, that again, I think, is evidence of what you might call this effort reward heuristic, or what I call Puritanism bias, which is it's painful, so it must be good. Now, I'll make a further point, okay? What do we know about productivity? Well, one of the things we know is that multiple streams are an absolute boost to productivity. We know that open plan is not good for productivity, and it's also really bad for serendipitous conversations. People tend to email each other at close range when you're in an open plan office, okay? Because there's always someone around you intently working. Now, in the old days, you came into the office and you had markedly better technology than you had at home, okay? You had a computer, which, believe it or not, in 1988, I didn't have a computer at home, okay? That came about 4 or 5 years later. I started work in 1988. You had massive photocopiers. You had fantastic computers compared to the non-computer that you had at home. You had telephones that you could use for free. There were no mobiles back then. I know it sounds hard to believe. But, you could ring America, which you couldn't do from home because there wasn't itemized billing. And you'd end up with, 90 quid in your phone bill and no way of claiming it back. Okay. And you also had a load of jollity going on in the office, where people were cracking jokes and enjoying banter. Okay. There were a hell of a lot of reasons other than colocation to encourage you to leave your home and go to a place of work. Now, okay, I'm now the vice chairman of an advertising agency. If I'd been the vice chairman of an advertising agency of the size of Ogilvy in 1988, I would have had an office like Mussolini, okay? I probably would have had a chauffeur. I'm not making this up, all right? I probably would have had my own sommelier and a walk-in humidor, and a sort of, a huge desk and and button back leather chairs and shit. Okay, right? Okay, I mean, literally, if I'd been in my current job in 1988, 89, there's a high chance I would have had either a chauffeur or half a chauffeur. I would have had, probably fresh flowers on my desk every day, my own sommelier, perhaps the company mixologist would come by. I'm slightly exaggerating this, okay, but not by much. It was actually worth getting to the top in 1988. There were kind of material rewards that made it worthwhile. Now, I'm the vice chairman of the company, and I leave a home where I have Nespresso machines, fridges, soda streams, I have, I'm watching you here on a 55-inch 4K monitor. Okay, I have really reliable broadband. I have £400 worth of microphone equipment bought with my own money. Okay, and when I go into the office, they say, "Here's a chair and here's a plug." Now, sorry, that's not fucking doing it for me, right? I mean, genuinely, I'm not entirely exaggerating when I say this is the contrast between being the vice chairman of a large organization in 1988, 1990, 1992, okay, where there would be considerable perquisites, and pertinences which actually rewarded you for turning up, other than colocation. And now in an open plan, hot desky environment, you turn up in exactly the same position, and you have far less technology and comfort than you have at home. Sorry, it's not happening. Forget this. Now, where's the money gone? Where's the money that used to be spent on the chauffeur gone? Where's the money that used to be spent on the... Okay, I probably imagined the sommelier. Okay, there probably wouldn't have been a walk-in humidor. Okay, but you get my point. Okay. I remember people who worked in advertising, and they said, I think your flight's been cancelled. Don't worry. This was in the United States. I'll call the airport and tell them to get the plane ready. Okay, right. This was the kind of stuff. When WPP bought Gray, they made a terrible mistake because he was getting trapped in. I think there was a snowstorm, and they said, "Oh no, we can fly you there on the company jet." You see. And that was evidence to Sorrell that obviously there was some, fat in the business. But it was the fat that made the business actually enjoyable. Now, what's happening? Okay, I wouldn't mind this if all the money was going to shareholders or was going to employees in the form of improved salaries. But it's not. The money we saved on the sommelier and the chauffeur is being spent on increasingly large HR, finance, compliance functions, procurement functions. It's all these weird kind of people who've just it's a kind of corporate oncology that have just grown all over the place. I mean, and actually the people who are actually engaged in productively performing the functions for which the business is designed are now in a minority in numbers, and they're often the least powerful and most overworked people in the whole organization because they're under permanent scrutiny from people from finance because they actually perform the function for which the organization is designed. They are actually billable, and therefore they're worked to death, where the HR people are free to dally off and say, can we have 3 new diversity and inclusion workshops, and no one actually asks for the cost of all that. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have those workshops. I'm just saying that the people who do the useful stuff, whether it's a doctor in a hospital, an academic in a university, right, a copywriter in an advertising agency, an auditor in a firm, they are now actually the most harshly scrutinized people in the organization, the least indulged people in the organization, when they used to be the most indulged people in the organization. What's gone wrong?
So let me ask you then, if a company said to you, right, okay, you've got free reign, you've got £500,000 to totally redesign our workplace, what would you build to make it the perfect place for productivity, but also profit?
Okay, very simple. I know exactly what I do in the advertising world. I'd start effectively an agency just as there were digital agencies being started in the early 90s, I'd actually start a Zoom-based agency. And I'd make it work not one-to-one, I'd make it work one-to-many. I'd effectively sell expertise through subscription, a kind of glorified Substack, actually, where you have both private brand level conversations, but also frequent presentations and webinars on subjects of category significance, let's say. And I would sell, instead of selling at sort of selling myself or my colleagues' time at, let's say 90, 100, 150 pounds an hour, one person at a time, I'd sell our time at £10 an hour to 150, 200 people simultaneously. Okay, we have as a business no network effects. Now, the real importance of Zoom, and I really mean this, and there are a few other people. There's a guy, I'm not alone in this. Noah Smith, the economist, believes there's the potential for a huge over-the-net productivity improvements. Never appear very quickly, by the way. Productivity gains from electrification took 10, 20, 30 years to really emerge. It's not a case that you replace technology A with technology B and suddenly everybody's vastly more productive. Effectively, what you need to do is you need to discover the new processes and new approaches which effectively extract the value from any new technological possibility. But the possibility to sell intellectual property while exploiting network effects, the possibility to have high quality conversations with network effects without booking a hotel, having catering, getting all these people in cabaret seating, the kind of thing you used to do for conferences, without any of that extraneous expense, without any of those geographical constraints, the opportunity to sell an idea to anybody in the world through high quality conversation and presentation strikes me as an extraordinary opportunity. A really good ad agency the first thing it should not do is worry about its geographical location. It should worry about its time zone. All right. And so that's the first thing I do is I'd reinvent it around that. In terms of what I would then do is I would adopt a Nassim Taleb barbell approach to colocation, which is very frequently for several days at a time, I would have the staff in that organization get together somewhere, Ibiza, London, it doesn't really matter. And I would have people very intensely, almost to the point of a campus, very intensely collocated for about 20 to 25% of their time and entirely free to go anywhere they like for the rest. Now, eventually, even that may become unnecessary because we'll have video conferencing technologies which actually make physical collocation unnecessary. What we need to wait for is Schumpeterian market size effects for more and more hardware actually to be developed that works with Zoom and works with Teams. And eventually it'll be possible to have a room where effectively one wall is effectively a screen, and you can actually have a meeting there and have a really good chat. Or there's the possibility. I'm basically skeptical about these VR devices. I can see the theory, okay, around VR video conferencing and the metaverse, but everything 3D and everything that requires people to wear specs or goggles has always failed. Now, in one case, Google Glass, I thought it was an actually brilliant idea, which failed because of bad marketing. Okay, I think we still need Google Glass, by the way. I think that's that's not a cul-de-sac. That's a really important thing to explore. But for all kinds of complex reasons, they messed up the launch. Have you ever bought Meta Portal TV made by Facebook? The thing you put on top of your telly, which lets you video conference on your big TV in HD with absolutely fantastic picture and sound quality. Miracle device. It cost about £100. Again, that never went anywhere. Partly because people were too terrified to let Mark Zuckerberg have a camera in their home, to be honest. But there will be more and more complementary technology developed, which will enable people to do this at a much higher quality and a much higher level of immersion. I mean, the strangest technology, which both you and I are using, but most people don't, or many people don't, I can't video call without headphones. To me, the idea is ridiculous. You need immersion, okay? And if you literally have your screen talking to you like a TV and you shout back, I genuinely can't do it that way. It just seems absurd to me but lots of people do it. They actually do it over loudspeakers. Now that's an example. Now, we've both discovered that over-the-ear cans make this work. But there's a guy called Nick Bloom at Stanford who does the big research on remote flexible working and all this other stuff. We need to be doing, when I said that's what I'd do, that's where I'd start, and then I'd continue to experiment. I'd continue to experiment with different options, different ratios, etc. Because there is the potential here for a Zoom boom, as Noah Smith called it, literally for an extraordinary increase in service sector productivity. So the problem with, most of the British economy is service industries. Most of the developed economies are service industries. Service industries have never enjoyed the absolutely miraculous kind of Fordist improvement in productivity that manufacturing was able to achieve. Okay. And this, I would argue, synchronous conversations, regardless of geography, is one step towards a kind of Fordist revolution in the productivity of service industries, but only if they reorganize themselves around the technology. That's why electrification didn't work in the early days. It's because people just replaced a steam engine with an electric motor and it wasn't as good, okay? Because steam engines have really, really high torque. It's a bit of a shame, really. I miss steam engines. I think they're gorgeous. Anyway, sorry. That's what High Speed 2 should have been. It should have been High Steam 2. Bring back steam locomotives, right? Now, but anyway, but what they did, instead of having lots of little electric motors which you could turn on and off, they just attached loads of things to one massive electric motor. Doesn't work that way. It was only when they started saying, okay, we have an electricity supply. In fact, they suddenly said, well, we don't have to perform all these functions on the same location because we can have a little electric motor over there and a little electric motor somewhere else. That was when the productivity gains from electrification came in, and it took 30 years because it wasn't enough just to replace the old thing with a new thing. You had to reshape your structures and processes around the technology. And I don't see us doing that. We should be reshaping. Every advertising agency, every business should be reworking its processes around what this technology makes possible. And I think we've partly because of my Puritanism bias, that I mentioned, and partly, the effort reward heuristic, I think we've treated this with suspicion when we should be greeting it with open arms.
So does this apply then to AI? I know a lot of people are saying AI coming from my jobs, but I see it more as they're taking away, they're becoming our assistants, and they're taking away all that. Like if you go into McDonald's, you used to go and speak to someone and place your order. Now you speak to a screen. So that allows McDonald's to either save money or move.
Whoa. You choose whether you interact with a screen or whether you interact with a human in McDonald's, or whether you go to the drive-through, or whether you book on your phone, or whether you get it delivered to your home. You choose, right? That's really important. I don't see McDonald's getting rid of the human any day soon because some people prefer it that way, okay? Some people want some weird order because they hate the pickle or whatever, and maybe it's not possible to customize on the screen. That's great. What McDonald's offers you is great because it's a suite of technologies which, according to your circumstances, temperament, age, and level of technological proficiency, you can choose those technologies for interaction that you like the most. Where it becomes problematic is where the screen is imposed. And I've written about this in today's Spectator, in fact, which is the difference between an option and an obligation. The difference between an option and an imposition. What then tends to happen, McDonald's are too intelligent to do this, okay? And they also have the sales data that tells them not to do it, okay? But what a lot of people will do is accountants will come in and they'll go, it looks like the screen is the lowest cost to serve, so we're going to force people to order by screen. You go to supermarkets now, Waitrose, right? Posh supermarket, Sevenoaks. Sevenoaks is my nearby town, is pretty minted, okay? But they're more or less forcing people, often in their 70s, to use the self-checkout tills, right? Not because, now that is exactly a W. Edwards Deming thing. In order to optimize the whole, you have to sub-optimize the parts. One, now it doesn't bother me because I'm a bit of a nerd and I self-scan. I go around with a bag and I beep with my mobile phone and then I check out, right? It's very difficult to do a proper £100 weekly shop with a self-checkout till. It's absolutely fine if you're buying 5 items, okay? I mean, if you're buying, 30, 50 things, you're standing there going, I'm paying Waitrose prices, and yet I'm doing their fucking job for them. And my neighbours, who are more elderly than me, are driven practically insane by this, to the point where they've stopped going to Waitrose because they resent the fact there are only 2 human conveyor belts. There are only 2-man conveyor belts, and they're like 27 bloody self-checkout things. And this is what happens, is that once you allow the accountant's preferences to trump consumer preference, you end up with a complete decline in variety, choice, and also in resilience as well, because you're forcing everything through the lowest cost channel. Okay, and when you only have one channel, you fundamentally lose resilience and optionality. And that's my problem with AI. There are 2 dangers with AI, one of which is that it's shit, and the other one that it's really good and gets imposed everywhere, or that it's nearly as good as a human, but not quite. But companies don't care because it's so much cheaper. And that what will happen is we're gearing up, right? We've got probably Accenture and Deloitte and everybody's gearing up to sell expensive AI projects to companies on the basis of cost savings through redundancy and headcount reduction, right? And it's going to be the Horizon, the Post Office Horizon project all over again if we're not careful. It's too easy to sell technology not on the basis of the improvement in the experience or value creation. It's much easier to sell technology and justify the cost on the basis of cost reduction than it is to sell technology on the basis of value creation. And as a consequence, most technology is sold the way it's easy to sell it, which basically leads to job destruction. Okay? It's the doorman fallacy, which is mentioned in my book. We'll get rid of the doorman. We'll define the doorman as the man at the hotel who opens the door. We'll replace him with an automatic door opening mechanism, and we'll lay claim to the cost savings. And it all seems great and logical until you realize that only about 20% of the doorman's job is opening the door. He also provides security, recognition, status, and a whole taxi hailing, luggage carrying, and a whole load of other shit, okay, which you conveniently chose to omit in defining his job function when it was appealing to you to make a case for the cost savings from automation. I can see that happening absolutely. I mean, I made this point to the National Infrastructure Commission about autonomous cars, self-driving cars. I said, the driver notionally is just driving the car, right? But there's another function of the driver, particularly in trucks, which is providing security for the goods in transit. Okay, he's riding his own shotgun, right? Now, when you have driverless trucks, are you really going to have a driverless truck full of, like, let's say, £500,000 worth of Marlboro? And you expect that not to get raided? Do you seriously expect that? Now, you could argue, well, the driver couldn't overcome 2 people with guns. But if you're using guns on a human being, you're now committing a serious kind of crime, right? Okay? It's not just being on the nick. Right. Why did everybody get angry with the Great Train Robbers, right? They didn't get angry with the Great Train Robbers because they nicked all the money. They got angry with them because they hit the driver of the train over the head. That took it into a different realm of crime, okay? And so we're defining the driver of a car there as merely the person who steers the car. But in truck driving, there's a huge security component, right? The guy sleeps in the cab. Now, okay, maybe you can get students just to sit in cabs all the time, doing their work or, playing computer games while the truck drives around. But my point is that we generally define people's jobs in those terms which make them most susceptible to automation and therefore replacement. And actually, genuinely, most jobs are a bit more nuanced than that. It's not that AI scares me because it's going to develop superpowers and destroy the world. It's simply because anything that is cheap is catnip to fucking finance people, because cost savings are both quantifiable and punctual, whereas value creation is hard to quantify in advance and genuinely a bit slower to manifest itself. So we've created short-termist financial measures which woefully predispose companies towards cost cutting rather than value creation. It's always money off, not value on.
I totally agree. I mean, there's so many examples in your book. Is there one particular story, perhaps, that you can think of that exemplifies why concentrating or prioritizing the employee actually generates a huge amount of value?
Okay, well, first of all, you should prioritize the customer first, I think, over the employee. Okay, that's my first point, okay? But I do believe you should certainly, well, first of all, longevity of staff, loyalty, and forming teams which are stable is really, really important. And what's happened is everybody's created a measure of productivity where in order to make each employee sort of fungible, okay, and replaceable. I had some prostate brachytherapy, and in the operation, they inject radioactive seeds into your prostate through your perineum. You probably don't want all this detail, okay, to irradiate what was a fairly mild, I don't want anybody to totally panic, it was fairly mild, very early stage prostate cancer, okay. It didn't metastate, it doesn't look particularly virulent, and there was a debate which is just leave it. So I don't want anybody to start panicking about me, okay. But what was interesting is the team, which comprises an oncologist, a surgeon, and an anaesthetist, always work together, okay? They always do this operation as a three. And I was sort of conscious because I wasn't under general anaesthetic, it was a spinal block. So I was probably, a little bit sedated, probably had a bit of a fentanyl hit or something, but I was conscious for this operation. And listening to them was fascinating because they were kind of finishing each other's sentences, They'd obviously worked together so often that they knew exactly, they had a kind of shorthand between them. And I did a lot of the conversation I couldn't understand because it was like 33, 32.4, one for, but it was absolutely clear that this was actually a team. Okay. And it was, now to someone who's in hospital administration, you just go anaesthetist A, we'll have oncologist B, and we'll have, surgeon C. Okay. And we'll just mix them up and they won't really form any of the same kind of strengths that you have when you have, this is effectively the ergodicity problem that one thing happening 10 times isn't the same as 10 things happening once. Okay. And yet for purposes of most, both assessment and process design, most processes are designed as if the people are in, each individual person is entirely interchangeable with another person of the same rank. And that's just not how humans work. But let me end up with a story, not about bees, but about chickens. Okay. It's called the Purdue University chicken experiment. And they tried taking chickens in kind of chicken farms, which are kept in cages of about 10. Okay. They're not free range. Apologies for that. Okay. And they measured the eggs that each chicken laid, and they bred from the most productive chickens. Okay. And then they tried a separate experiment where they bred from the most productive cages. In other words, they said this cage produces more eggs than that cage, so we'll breed from these chickens, not the other chickens. Well, okay, we'll breed from the most productive cages. The other experiment, they bred from the most productive individuals. I will find you the video for this so you can put it at the end. When they bred for the most productive individual chickens, you created psycho chickens who pecked each other to death and were a total catastrophe, and the cages produced very few eggs indeed. When you bred from the most productive cages, the productivity of each cage went up and up and up. And you need to be measuring efficacy at the level of the group, not at the level of the individual. They're all, the group doesn't have to be particularly big. It could be 5 or it could be 50, but that's the correct way to incentivize and measure. Once you take it down to the level of the individual employee and treat individual employees as though they're substitutable and fungible, you're getting the maths wrong.
I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, then I have good news. There are over 100 back episodes for you to binge on. Not all of them feature Rory, of course, but we have many other incredible guests.
To be fair, with 2 hours interview with Rory, most of them could actually include Rory if you wanted to. All our episodes are numbered. The even numbers like 102, 104, 106, etc. are Tuesday episodes where we bring you your weekly fix of workplace news. We bring you the spicy takes from our expert panel, and of course our world famous weekly workplace surgery where I put your questions to Leanne. And of course every odd numbered episode like 101, 103, you know how odd numbers work, are our Thursday episodes where we're just like this. We sit down with someone who's an expert in the workplace and ask them the questions that most podcasters are afraid to.
And if you care about workplace culture, check out next week's episode with a full, unedited, never heard before interview with the OG of organisational psychologist himself, Professor John Amici. And again, say hi in the comments, especially hello to solopunk_, who's commented and inspired us to do this episode.
Yeah, solarpunk_ said to us at the bottom of the last Rory episode, where we only played about 40 minutes of the 2 hours, he said, when you have a great guest, podcast host should get out of the way. Great conversation ruined by overproduced bollocks. To be fair, you were right.
You're not wrong.
So happy Christmas, Solarpunk. I hope this makes you happy. And if you are watching this, just comment. Let us know. We'd love to get your feedback, even if it is a little bit harsh.
Anyway, don't forget to subscribe. I think you click a button, ring a bell or something. I don't know. I'm not a real YouTuber. And we'll see you next time. Until then, have a very, 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 very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.